We built what we built first because we knew if we were going to solve this for the entire industry, it had to be candidate databases that were ever growing. And we couldn't be reliant on those traditional job boards because then it would be just as ineffective as it's always been. And secondly, we would have to pass those costs along to the operators.
William Coker, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Rick, how are you?
Good, man. Listen, appreciate you being on today. Looking forward to our conversation. Where are you based again? Are you in California?
I'm in California. Our offices are in Westlake Village, so we're about 45 minutes north of LA.
There you go. All right. Well, look, I know I gave you a heads up, and I hope that you came prepared, but it's part of the rite of passage for being on the podcast. Did you bring your dad joke?
I did. Yeah, and I'm a dad of four, so I've got a lot of
Yes, you're
practice
a pro.
at this. Yeah. Yeah, I get the eye rolls all the time over these.
I love it.
So I got two, both sort of fitness related. So in 2025, I didn't do a marathon. I didn't do one in 2024, 2023, or 2022 either. This is a running joke.
Yes, I love it. Perfect. Oh, and you have another one. Let's do it,
I have
man.
a bonus. I have a bonus. I
Let's do
thought
it.
the dryer was shrinking my clothes. Turns out it was the refrigerator all along.
And fitness related. Yeah, you don't miss, my
Yeah,
friend. I appreciate that. Well, I was
yeah.
talking to my lady last night and I was looking at her and she's been, went to, had her hair done and everything. And I'm like, I think you're painting your eyebrows too high. And, she looked surprised. So bad. Oh, I love it.
So
All right.
bad.
Well, look, we got that out of the way. We're going to talk about who you are, not to bury the lead. You are the president of a company called FIBR, which is for lack of better terms, a recruiting company for fitness talent, for fitness businesses like mine and others, of course. But before we dig into what is FIBR and what makes you guys different, can we get a little bit of background from you? Just let the audience get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, first I want to explain what always comes across on these recordings. I listen to them and I'm like, oh my gosh, I sound like a Southern bumpkin. So I'm not originally from California. I know that comes as a shocker. Born and raised in Clemson, South Carolina. I still carry the accent with me to this day. But yeah, my background, I was a military naval air crewman in the U.S. Navy for about 11 years active duty, a couple of years reserves after that, and obviously very fitness related job. So it was kind of a natural transition into civilian life in the fitness world. I started in 1998 as a part-time personal trainer with what had just become 24-hour fitness in Southern California, and served a couple of years while I was still serving on active duty. As a part-time personal trainer with them, transitioned from active duty to a fitness manager position with 24-hour fitness, transitioned into the reserves with the military. I was with 24 for about a decade, did all the jobs as we kind of grew it, across the country. In 2009, I transitioned with the original founder and owner of 24-hour fitness, as many people know, sold. He went and did a whole bunch of other things. So that led to me transitioning to Crunch. I joined Crunch in 2009, running personal training for them. Packed up my family. We were based in Austin, Texas, with 24 at that time, and we moved to New York City. So
Ooh.
that was quite a transition. I was with Crunch for from 2009 to 2023, and then I did, because of the my leadership and the founder of 24 Fitness was involved with a whole bunch of stuff. So I did brief stints, always related to that, in mergers and acquisitions and founding projects. But throughout that kind of 15-year period, it was primarily Crunch. But I also had some great experiences with One Life Fitness and Gold's Gym and EOS and their original founding and in that group. In 2023, I resigned my position with Crunch, where I was overseeing personal training, education, and recruiting. And that's when we launched full speed ahead into FIBR.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a great background, and thanks for your service. My son just got out of the Navy in February, so he went to the academy and then was a submarine officer for
Awesome.
9 years or so, and just got out and married a Swedish woman and lives in Stockholm now. Works for Boston Consulting Group, so it's like transitioning to civilian life, which you certainly understand. But yeah, man, appreciate your service for sure.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
well, listen, I know a lot of the guys that you're involved with, right? Mark and certainly Neil and some guys that are personal friends of mine. And I love those guys, sharp guys, good dudes as well. I've only known them through some business dealings, whether it be Dot Fit or other things, and just really good people in general. So I love the folks that are behind it. Sounds like that's your DNA as well. So, tell me, what is fiber? Why did you guys, what did you see that lets you know that there was a gap there that you needed to fill? And then maybe describe what makes fiber different from other fitness recruiting firms.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the vision for fiber was, it was born obviously from my own experiences in the field, overseeing, personal training, recruiting, education, for, all those brands that I'm, mentioned previously. Let's face it, for far too long, in my own personal experiences, recruiting and staffing have always kind of been the Achilles heel of our industry. It's always that thing that we never seem to stop chasing. It's also obviously incredibly important, right? I always say that we do our best to overcomplicate fitness for sure, but at its core, what do? We hire people and train those people and serve those people so they can go out into our communities and serve more people, right? So it's also incredibly important to operators because it is the true product of our industry, right? And the my own experiences were that all of clearly all we have to kind of face the brutal facts, right? That everything we've done in my own experience for the last 25 years clearly hasn't been terribly effective when it comes to recruiting and staffing because we're constantly in this understaffed situation, right? So I found that all the solutions that we had were, with the same old job boards and job posts and sponsoring those posts and, maybe paying staff members to, kind of weed through that haystack that you get from those. I found it to be obviously ineffective, highly expensive, and very arduous and cumbersome, right? And so what we've built at Fiber, I had done more on kind of the micro level at those brands, right? And so it began in 2021. My co-founders, who had experienced me doing some of this on a brand level for recruiting and bringing expenses way down while driving candidates way up, came to me and said, could let's go back to where we were at that particular time, right? Coming out of COVID, the industry on average, depending on the company, but it's going to be in this range, was at about 40% staffing of where it was in 2019, right? And so the industry really, really needed to, kind of solve this issue once and for all, in my opinion, right? And so my co-founders came to me and they said, couldn't you do what you did at X brand with your recruiting and your affiliate partnerships? Couldn't you do that for the entire industry? And I said, yeah, you absolutely could. Right. And so that's kind of, where it began. And in a nutshell, what makes fiber different and what we built was, our industry, all you have to do is go to URSA and walk the floor and you see this, right? Our industry, from a people standpoint, is actually pretty self sustaining, right? But someone had to come in and, anyone could have done this, but for whatever reason, I guess no one ever, thought of it. I would say it would definitely have to be folks like you, Rick, and like us, people from inside the industry, right? This would have been very difficult to do from somebody outside the industry, or it would be highly expensive. What Fiber stands for is FitBridge. right? So essentially what we did, we spent 2 years building our own proprietary databases, right? Because on one side of our industry, just like the ursa floor, the idea floor, and so on, right, there's all of these organizations that service the operators, right? All of our partners, right? You've got education, certification, apparel, gear, equipment. Then you've also got all of these community college programs, four-year universities, obviously, collegiate athletics, and the military programs that are out there that many of our industry aren't even aware of, right? So what we did was we went to all of those partners and essentially created affiliate partnerships, essentially in a nutshell, saying, for a long time, your people who purchased your equipment, your people who did your qualification, your people who completed your community college program, your students, your consumers, you have tried to do job placement with them into our industry. And they haven't done a real great job at that, right? So we essentially said, how about we create a partnership with you and we handle that for you. We fit bridge all those people into actual job roles, right? So we spent 2 years building our own proprietary databases. Like I shared a second ago, it kind of breaks down into certification education, college programs, military programs, and then kind of other, which is all the folks who came from gear, apparel, equipment, and so on. And once we amassed, today, our proprietary databases consist of about 5.2 million people, right? The reality of it is, if someone works in our industry currently, they used to work in our industry, or they have expressed through many different ways that they would like to work in our industry, they're in our databases, right? So in June 2023, after we had built that, um, and again, why did we build that first? Because again, the approaches we've taken historically haven't worked, right? I mean, we're still really understaffed. We have to be brutally honest with that, right? As much as we may love our Indeed ads or our LinkedIn post, we're still understaffed, right? And so, what most firms do that come into our industry and try to help our operators is essentially this: they take your job needs, they run passive job ads, right? Apply some money to those. They gather the candidates, maybe they screen them, and then they forward them over to the operators, right? Well, a couple of things. The operators should do that themselves, right? And then two, that's why the cost sometimes are much higher than the operators would like, right? Because they're just passing those costs along to the operators, right? So we built what we built first because we knew if we were going to solve this for the entire industry, right, it had to be candidate databases that were ever growing, and we couldn't be reliant on those traditional job boards because then it would be just as ineffective as it's always been. And secondly, we would have to pass those costs along to the operators, right? So June 2023, we launched active recruiting, hired some of the industry's most experienced recruiters behind the scenes. And today we're, servicing over 40 brands in the industry. We're covering about 900 or so locations in the US, Canada, Europe, and Australia. And in simple terms, no one in the fitness industry can do what we do as well as we do it for the low price point that we do it, right? I'm asked that question by operators all the time. They're like, okay, first of all, this is always the question after a couple of weeks, which is great to hear. They'll say, okay, where did you find all these people? Right? Because I've been running ads and we haven't seen, this many candidates. And then secondly, how can you do this for the price point that you do it? Well, again, it goes back to, we already have all the candidates. so we don't have to pay to find them. That's what someone needed to build all along, right? So that's fiber in a nutshell.
No, I appreciate that. And I do. I also, when I originally heard the cost, it was so low, and then I heard your backstory, which made a lot of sense. Because again, I've been in the industry for 34 years. This has not happened as of yet. And so it really is. I mean, like people ask me in a nutshell, what makes these guys different? I'm like, well, they have a massive database of fitness professionals from lots of different sources that other people don't have. And because of this database, it makes their service much less expensive. So it's a better candidate pool for a lot less money. So I can't see anything negative about that. And I know you and the principals of the company is stand up folks with really great integrity. So it's like, hey, it's just a win-win all the way around. Well, we're proud to have you in the vendor suite. So for those that are listening that are with Alloy, FIBR is a preferred vendor now. And you can get there from guides, which is our, Bible, if you will. You can drop in there and go to the vendor suite and find you guys and link up and get rolling. So we appreciate the resource for us because, as you know, with nearly 400 locations awarded and I think now 127 or so opening. I think we opened 3 yesterday. So we're opening clubs in 35 or so states. We're scaling quickly, and having a partner that can help us locate talent is going to be key. And so we really appreciate you guys for that. Well, let's shift gears a bit, and just based on how much knowledge that you have in the industry, what are some common challenges that you see now or maybe forever in our industry in recruiting and maintaining really top talent? What are some maybe things that you've seen and maybe some tips that you can give any of our listeners or our franchisees on, just how to recruit people and how to be the person that you're looking for is looking for, and then how do you keep people long term?
Yeah, yeah, and also on these, so I kind of broke this down, Rick. I'll break it down like first you have to find them, right? Then you have to engage with them, and you have to hire them, and then there's the subject of okay, now they're your employee. How do you keep them, right?
Sure.
I always kind of look at it in those three buckets,
We say the
and we
same
most
thing. I mean,
yeah
your
we most
ability
certainly as
to attract, hire, and lead good people will make or break your Alloy location. If you can do it well, it might be pretty darn easy. If you can't, it will not be as easy. that's that's basically
yep
it. The market
yeah
response is great to the product and to the service. You just got to get the right people on the bus and put them in the right seats, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I would say, common challenges in recruiting and hiring and you're retaining kind of in those three buckets. What do we obviously see it all, right? Because we work with so many different types of operators. At any given time, we are recruiting for everything from a front desk associate to the COO of a franchise group, right? And kind of everything in between. So we definitely see the good, the bad, and the sometimes ugly in people acquisition and hiring for sure, right? So um, and also for the listeners, we have an educational blog on our website that has tons of educational information on these very three topics, right? As we were working with operators, we were getting a lot of requests for, doing a webinar on this or webinar on that. So I also started kind of putting it into blog posts that
Hmm.
people could reference anytime. So for the listeners, feel free to check it out. It's just FIBR fiber.fit/news. And all of these topics that we're about to discuss are pretty, are there in more detail, right? But with finding talent, recruiting, the biggest issue that we see is so time consuming. Right. Operators are busy. Sometimes, franchisees have multiple locations. Maybe they've got other things that they're doing as well. So first, biggest challenge is recruiting is arduous. It's time consuming, which then leads to the challenges that we've seen, right? Because it is arduous and it is time consuming to do it proactively, right? To hunt, right? What busy operators do in most of your big brand, big box gyms, this is how they recruit, is they become almost exclusively reliant on job ads. Okay. Because I just don't have time to go look. So I'm just going to post these passive job ads. I'm maybe going to put some money on it. Right. And what a lot of folks don't, again, they're busy, they don't have time to kind of dissect recruiting into its nth degree, right? I totally
Right.
get it. I do, they don't. I totally get it, right?
Sure.
But what a lot of folks don't always realize with recruiting is when you're solely reliant on ads, right? Which I would say that's the strategy for 90% of our recruiting in our industry, right? Um, we have to remember that we are then only talking to folks who are actively looking, right? That's a very small percentage of the total potential candidate pool, right?
Right.
And so there are many, many more potential candidates who may not be actively looking. I would venture to say that probably 80% of the candidates that we find, through proactive recruiting, we screen, pass our screen, go over to the operators. They weren't actively looking for a job, right? So if we were solely reliant on ads, we would have never met that person, right?
Right.
And so I think the number one challenge that we see is that it's so time consuming that my only option I'm left with is to post ads, which is highly ineffective and highly expensive, right? And then we don't even realize that there's a whole host of other candidates in our marketplace that we could be talking to, right?
Right.
So that's definitely the biggest challenge with recruiting. Then once we make contact with the candidates, part two, right? We have to actually get them hired and through a process that sometimes is probably a bit more arduous for the candidate than it needs to be. But if we take a look at most of the studies, most of the information that's out there, with let's face it, most of the people that we're recruiting right now in 2025 are of the Gen Z generation. That's the bulk of the folks that we are often recruiting, right? You could even kind of put younger millennials into this as well. But what do they want? Okay, in the world that they've grown up in, right? With everything at their fingertips, right? What do they want? They want to be hired fast. But the ironic thing is with the generation, so they don't have time for 3-part interviews that are spread over a month. They're already off to your competitor, right? So you must move faster than we have historically, right? They're not going to adjust, we have to adjust, right? So they want to be hired fast. But the ironic thing is they're craving relationship, right? So this generation that hasn't really had that, with their leadership, with the company they sign on to, they're very relationally led. Okay. So because of this, so the old days of I can bribe them through transactional, compensation and they'll just do it, or the old days of have this title and they'll just follow. It's almost 100% relational. So they want to be hired fast and they want to be trained slow. Now, think about what we do as an industry. We do the polar opposite, right? So we often hire very slowly. We can not always, sometimes not always be the best at following up in a timely manner, scheduling interviews in a timely manner, so on and so forth. We've all seen it, right? And then once we hire them, we train them extremely fast, right? Here's your clipboard, here's your pen, go get them, right?
Right.
And again, varying levels. I understand there's some operators who are better at parts of this, but they want to be hired fast and trained slow. When we source and screen a candidate, and we send it over, the most important thing is not that someone emails them an application link that they've got to fill out, right? They want to hear from a person at that company as quickly as possible, right? If we don't, they're already, because that's another thing for folks like, you and I, Rick, and our quote unquote age in the industry and our dad jokes, right? you know, I often say when I came into the industry, there were like 5 places to work. That was it,
Right.
right? You went to Bally's, LA, 24, Golds, and I'm probably forgetting the fifth. I'm forgetting the fifth one, right? But with very limited choices. We have to remember that today's candidate, they have dozens of places that they can work. So if we don't move quick, they're gone,
Right.
right? So hire fast and train slow. And then with retention, I will say this could be an entire podcast
Of
episode
course.
series, and I would be happy to come back and kind of dive into that one. But just two quick things. One, 2005 called and it wants its compensation plan back, right? So I always challenge operators to, you know, really look at your compensation plan. Now, I'm not saying it has to be greater. I'm saying, because budgets are budgets, totally get that. But how you incentivize, is it the same as the plan that I got in 2005? Looks
Right.
pretty similar, right? So again, going back to, sometimes I talk to operators and they're like, well, we changed our compensation plans, okay, did you actually change how they're bonus, how they're measured, their KPIs, or did the state minimum wage just go up and you called that compensation evolution,
Right.
right? So I think with how we incentivize and how we compensate, there's probably some areas of opportunity there to move it to things that are more in keeping with the newer generations, right? And then the other I kind of mentioned briefly earlier is leadership and motivating the Gen Z employee is almost 100% relational and purpose driven. They're transactional leadership, which moved millennials and Gen Xers, where it's just like, hey, if I make the bonus or the contest payout high enough, they'll just do it. I often say my generation, the Gen Xers, you could bribe us, right?
Right.
You put enough contest money out there, I'm going to run through a brick wall, right?
Right.
They're not really, again, not that they don't want to make a good living and those sorts of things, but that's not usually enough to get them to move, right? What gets them to
Right.
move is your time, your relationship with them, right? And I see a lot of challenges with this with folks of my, kind of age group, right?
Yep.
Um, and then, of course, positional leadership. It it's dead. Like, people aren't gonna move anymore just because of my title, right?
Right.
Because I said so, right? So those would be just kind of two quick things just for people to think about in regards to retention. Are we compensating our KPIs something that the current generation can relate to and be
Mm-hmm.
moved by? And the second is, how am I doing with relational leadership? And again, if listeners have time, feel free to check out our blog. There is tons of educational information on these topics on there.
Yeah, man. Love it. And I think that's what we see across the board, really engaged owners that are just really nice people that develop really great relationships. And, we've got owners that are in their 60s and they have directors, which is manager, and coaches that are in their 20s. And it works really well because it's just really nice people, right? It's just like
Mhm.
ladies and gentlemen servicing ladies and gentlemen, like the old Ritz-Carlton saying. And that works no matter what the age gap is, right? But that's more relational. It's not if I change my comp structure for my director with more sales tiers or whatever, to your point, it's okay to have KPIs and it's okay to have spiffs, but I think the basis of the relationship needs to be relational, not transactional. And then,
Hmm.
of course, you got to compensate fairly, obviously, to get people to be able to make a living and keep a roof over their head. But outside of that, that's not going to move the needle, very far. And I think it's what we find is our most successful franchisees, because the crux move is the people. They hire and lead and retain really good folks on their team. They treat them really well. They are very relational, and the business just works because you've got a product delivery. I mean, we control the programming and the algorithms and all the things that get people in the door and, around their injuries to the right level and all the things. But a human being has to deliver that. And the things they put
Hmm.
around it, make it come to life with the customer experience. And they're not going to do that unless you care about them in a way that then they can turn and model how they're going to care about the customers, right? So, yeah, tons to unpack there. To your point, it could be a whole nother podcast. But listen, man, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you guys as a franchise partner of ours or a vendor partner in our vendor suite. Just hearing you today, because we haven't had a lot of time to spend, just you and I, it makes me feel even better about it, if I'm honest, because it really aligns with the same things that we are coaching, to our franchisees.
Hmm.
Before I get your info and where people can find you, I do have a bonus question for you. So now,
Okay.
knowing that you were in the Navy, I'm sure you at a few times in your naval career imbibed a little bit, right? And some different venues. And so, gun to your head, if you had to sing karaoke, what song are you singing and why?
Oh boy. Um, well, I was definitely of the Top Gun generation, right? And I often say that movie is what led me, it really was. And so I think we would probably riff off You've Lost That Love and Feeling for sure.
There
Yeah,
you
we'd
go.
pull a little goose, a little maverick for sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. A little bit of alcohol, a little bit of nostalgia. You got it rolling. Well, look,
Yeah.
William, I appreciate you, man. Like I said, I'm really happy that you're in our vendor suite. I think we got a lot of damage to do. As you know, we're growing like crazy, and really proud to have you guys as our partner. Even more so after this conversation. If you're with Alloy, you guys, you can find fiber through, again, our guides, which is essentially our franchise manual. So go to the vendor suite, you'll find fiber in there. Reach out. If somebody's not with Alloy, though, William, how would they find out more about you guys? Where would you send them? Or if they would just want to find out more about you personally, what would you recommend?
Thank you for having me on, Rick. We're honored to be partnered with Alloy, and I do think it's kind of a perfect partnership given your product and your type of staff and so on and so forth for sure. So thanks for having me on. Thanks for allowing us to play a small part in what you're building there. Congratulations on what you're building there for sure. So I can be reached at just William at FIBR.fit. So anyone feel free to just reach out to me directly. We are always happy to just jump on a Zoom and talk about your staffing and your people, and happy to do that. We do it all the time. It really is something that we want to solve this for the industry, right? It doesn't have to be, I always say we don't have a candidate problem in our industry. We don't. We've always had a recruiting problem, and we have a getting them hired problem, right? So happy to jump on with anyone anytime. Our website is just fibr.fit. Lots of information on there. Like I said, fiber.fit/news. There's a ton of education on all things people there. But truly appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Thanks, William. And listen, again, invaluable resource. You guys, you got the news. If you're not with Alloy, reach out to William anyway. If you're with Alloy, you've got a great new vendor partner. And yeah, onward and upward, my friend.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, sir.
You too. Cheers.